For as long as humans have gathered around fires under starlit skies, we've whispered stories of creatures just beyond the edge of our understanding. These aren't just tales to frighten children. They're echoes of something deeper, older, and far more mysterious. Think of the chills that race down your spine when you hear the howl of a wolf on a moonlit night, or the way your breath catches at the shadow of something moving just out of sight in the woods. That instinctive pull toward the unknown is what binds us to legends of dragons, griffins, and sirens, beings woven into the fabric of cultures across the globe, each one a puzzle waiting to be unraveled. What if I told you these mythical creatures aren't just figments of imagination, but reflections of our deepest fears, hopes, and forgotten histories? From the bloodthirsty vampires of Eastern Europe to the majestic phoenix rising from its own ashes, every legend carries a kernel of truth, or at least a clue to how ancient people made sense of a world far stranger than our textbooks let on. Picture a medieval map marked with the words, "Here be dragons," not as a warning, but as an invitation to explore the uncharted corners of human experience. These stories are more than folklore, they're time capsules preserving the dreams and dreads of civilizations long gone. Today, we're stepping into that shadowy realm where myth and history collide. We'll trace the origins of 25 of the most enigmatic creatures ever conjured by the human mind, uncovering the surprising real-world events and psychological truths that might have birthed them. Did you know, for example, that the terrifying kraken, a beast said to drag entire ships into the abyss, could have been inspired by giant squids glimpsed by terrified sailors? Or that the banshee's mournful wail might echo the cries of women mourning their dead in ancient Celtic rituals? This isn't just a catalogue of monsters, it's a journey into the heart of what makes us human. So light a torch, steel your nerves, and let's dive into the darkness together, because the truth behind these legends is stranger than any fiction. The dragon is perhaps the most universal of all mythical creatures, appearing in cultures separated by thousands of miles and centuries of time. But where did this awe-inspiring beast first take flight in the human imagination? The answer lies in the dusty ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, where some of the earliest dragon-like creatures slithered into mythology. The Mesopotamian Mushachek letter 1 E2 Bushachek a fearsome hybrid of serpent, lion, and eagle, wasn't just a monster, it was a sacred guardian depicted on the fabled Ishtar Gate of Babylon as a symbol of divine power. Meanwhile, across the world in China, the dragon took on a strikingly different role. Unlike the fire-breathing terrors of the West, Chinese dragons were celestial beings of rain and wisdom, their coiled bodies embodying the life-giving rivers and the emperor's authority. What could explain such drastically different interpretations of the same creature? One tantalizing clue comes from the earth itself, literal bones of the past. Long before paleontology existed, people stumbling upon massive fossilized remains might have seen not extinct animals, but proof of dragons. In China, so-called dragon bones were ground into medicine for centuries, likely the fragmented remains of prehistoric creatures like the towering mammoths or the long-necked dinosaurs. Imagine a farmer unearthing a saber-toothed tiger's curved fang or the jagged spine of a stegosaurus. Wouldn't it be natural to assume these belong to some great beast still lurking in the unknown? Even today, the line between myth and reality blurs in places like the Gobi Desert, where dinosaur skeletons weather out of the rock like the broken relics of forgotten giants. Yet the dragon is more than just misidentified fossils. It's a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest instincts. In the West, dragons often represent chaos, the untamed wilds waiting to be conquered by heroes like St. George. But in the East, they symbolize harmony, the delicate balance between earth and sky. Perhaps that's why these creatures endure. They're not just stories, but a language of symbols, whispering secrets about how our ancestors saw the world, and how we still wrestle with the same awe today. From the ashes of countless civilizations rises a creature whose legend burns as brightly as the sun itself, the phoenix. This immortal bird first spread its fiery wings in ancient Egypt, where the Bennu, a heron-like deity, was worshipped as the soul of the sun god Ra. Perched atop the sacred Benben stone in Heliopolis, the Bennu's cry marked the dawn of creation, its cyclical rebirth mirroring the Nile's annual floods that brought life to the desert. But when Greek travelers carried the tale across the Mediterranean, the phoenix transformed no longer just a herald of renewal, but a blaze of scarlet and gold that consumed itself in flames every 500 years, only to emerge anew from its own ashes. The phoenix's story isn't just about resurrection, it's a cosmic clockwork. Solar cults from Rome to Persia saw the bird as a living embodiment of the sun's daily death at dusk and rebirth at dawn. Alchemists later adopted it as the ultimate symbol of transformation, its fiery demise representing the purification of base metals into gold, a metaphor for the human soul's journey toward perfection. Even medieval bestiaries, those illustrated encyclopedias of wonder, couldn't resist the phoenix's allure. Scribners painted it in vivid hues, often beside the legend that only one phoenix could exist at a time, making its rare appearances feel like divine interventions. What's most fascinating isn't just the phoenix's staying power, but how its meaning shifts like smoke on the wind. For some, it's a promise of hope, proof that destruction can precede rebirth. For others, it's a cautionary tale about the cost of immortality. And tucked between the lines of these ancient texts lies a truth as old as humanity itself, our obsession with cheating death, with finding light in the darkest ashes. Whether etched on Egyptian temple walls or inked onto parchment by medieval monks, the phoenix reminds us that endings are never final, just pauses before the next fiery beginning. Among all mythical creatures, few capture the imagination like the unicorn, a symbol of purity that somehow feels both delicate and indomitable. But beneath its glittering legend lies a far messier truth, tangled in mistranslations and mistaken identities. Medieval merchants returning from distant lands spun tales of single-horned beasts, and scholars now believe they were describing not magical horses, but the spiraled tusks of narwhals, Arctic whales whose teeth resembled something ripped straight from a fairy tale. Sailors sold these unicorn horns for fortunes, claiming they could neutralize poison, while kings mounted them in crowns as symbols of divine favor. Yet the narwhal theory doesn't account for older unicorn descriptions, like those in ancient Greek texts where the creature was more goat than horse. Enter the elasmotherium, a prehistoric rhinoceros that roamed Eurasia with a single massive horn. Fossil evidence suggests this Ice Age giant survived long enough for early humans to encounter it and potentially mythologize its remains. But here's the twist: unicorns weren't always gentle. Persian carvings depict them as formidable combatants, while medieval bestiaries warned that only virgins could tame their fury. This duality reveals how myths evolve, bending to fit the fears and values of each culture that retells them. Now, plunge from sunlit meadows into the ocean's abyss, where the kraken's tentacles have gripped human fear for millennia. Norse sagas spoke of this monster as an island-sized beast that could drag entire ships into the depths, a terror so vivid, historians suspect Viking sailors encountered real-life giant squids. These elusive deep-sea creatures, some spanning over 40 feet, occasionally surface in death, their mangled bodies resembling something torn from legend. 18th century naturalists like Carl Linnaeus even classified the kraken as a real species, citing fishermen's accounts of whirlpools created by submerged tentacles. But the kraken's mythic power isn't just about size, it's about the unknown. Ancient maps marked unexplored waters with illustrations of the creature, a warning that some frontiers should remain uncharted. Modern oceanography has stripped away much of that mystery, yet we've barely explored 5% of our oceans, leaving room for the possibility that something kraken-like still lurks in the crushing dark. From unicorns to krakens, these creatures remind us that every legend begins with a kernel of truth, warped by time into something wondrous. The howl of the werewolf echoes through history not as mere fantasy, but as a terrifying intersection of medicine, madness, and primal human fear. Long before Hollywood gave us silver bullets and full moons, the roots of lycanthropy reached deep into prehistoric shamanic rites. Cave paintings from Neolithic Europe depict hybrid figures, half man, half beast, suggesting early rituals where hunters donned wolf pelts to channel the animal's strength. These ceremonies weren't about monstrosity but transformation, a sacred blurring of boundaries between human and predator. Yet somewhere along the way, the spiritual became sinister. The oldest written account comes from ancient Rome, where Petronius's Satyricon describes a traveler encountering a soldier who strips naked, urinates in a circle, and morphs into a wolf, a tale so vivid, scholars debate whether it reflects early folklore or an actual witness to psychotic episodes. By the Middle Ages, werewolf hysteria gripped Europe, fueled by rabies outbreaks. Victims of the disease, foaming at the mouth and convulsing in agony, were said to howl like beasts before attacking their neighbors. No wonder communities whispered of men cursed by the devil, their bodies twisting under the influence of some unholy force. But the darkest chapter unfolded during the witch trials, where accusations of lycanthropy became weapons of mass persecution. In 16th century France, the case of the werewolf of Chalons shocked the courts. A confessed serial killer claimed demonic pacts transformed him into a wolf to slaughter children. Modern psychologists recognize these testimonies as possible cases of clinical lycanthropy, a rare delusion where sufferers believe they morph into animals. Yet the terror wasn't just in the mind, it thrived in the shadows of famine and plague, where society's desperation bred monsters. The werewolf myth, then, is more than a cautionary tale. It's a mirror reflecting humanity's oldest fear, the beast within waiting to break free. The vampire's fangs sink deepest not in Gothic castles, but in the fertile soil of Slavic folklore, where the Upia first crawled from its grave. These undead revenants weren't seductive aristocrats, but bloated, ruddy-faced corpses accused of draining the life from their own families. In 18th century Serbia, panic erupted when villagers exhumed bodies they claimed were rising at night, reporting fresh blood around their mouths and nails that had grown after burial. The hysteria reached such heights that Austrian officials documented cases like Peter Plagojevic's, whose alleged post-mortem attacks led to his corpse being staked through the heart. Yet this was no isolated fear. Across cultures, from the Mesopotamian Lilitu-winged demons who drank infants' blood to China's stiff-armed jiangshi, the dead were never quite done with the living. What's startling isn't just the parallels, but the eerily similar ways cultures tried to keep these creatures buried. In Serbia, hawthorn stakes through the stomach mirrored Chinese traditions of placing wooden blocks under a jiangshi's chin to prevent it from hopping. The Lilitu's legend even birthed the first known anti-vampire charms, clay figurines buried beneath doorways to trap them. Scholars now recognize these practices as macabre misinterpretations of decomposition. Bodies swelling from gas, proof they'd fed on blood. Hair and nails appearing to grow, simple shrinkage of decaying tissue. But beneath the superstition lies something darker, our primal terror of contagion. Vampire myths often surged during plagues, with the undead blamed for spreading death. In medieval Europe, a tuberculosis outbreak could turn a grieving family into a mob, convinced their loved one was sucking breath from the living. Yet the vampire's evolution from rotting peasant to cloaked aristocrat is its most revealing transformation. French revolutionary pamphlets depicted nobility as blood-drinking parasites long before Bram Stoker penned Dracula. Even the jiangshi, once a reanimated corpse, became a Qing-era metaphor for corrupt officials, draining the people. These creatures are more than monsters, they're cultural stress gauges, shape-shifting to embody whatever we fear is stealing our life force. Whether whispering through Mesopotamian desert winds or lurking in Serbian graveyards, the vampire's true power isn't immortality, but its endless rebirth in our collective nightmares. Half eagle, half lion, the griffin stands as one of history's most enduring chimeras, a creature so vividly real to ancient cultures that its golden likeness adorned thrones and temple gates. The earliest whispers of its legend come not from myth, but from the frozen tombs of the Scythians, nomadic warriors who ruled the Eurasian steppes 3,000 years ago. Archaeologists uncovering their burial mounds have found intricate gold plaques depicting griffins with curled beaks and wings outstretched, creatures the Scythians believed guarded the gold hidden beneath the earth. But what's truly fascinating isn't just their artistry, it's where these nomads might have gotten the idea. Enter the Protoceratops, a dinosaur whose fossilized remains litter the Gobi Desert. Picture a Scythian trader stumbling upon one of these skeletons, the beak-like mouth, the four-legged stance, the bony frill that could easily be mistaken for wings when half buried in sand. Suddenly, a beast of legend emerges from literal bones, yet the griffin's story doesn't end with mistaken fossils, it soars into the halls of empires. Persian rulers adopted it as a symbol of divine authority, embedding its image into palace walls to signify their God-given right to rule. The Byzantines took it further, weaving griffins into their very architecture. Marble reliefs in Constantinople showed them flanking the throne of Christ, their claws gripping the boundaries between heaven and earth. This wasn't just decorative, it was psychological warfare. When the emperor's enemies saw griffins carved above city gates, they weren't just facing human soldiers but the wrath of celestial guardians. What makes the griffin unique among mythical creatures is its duality. Unlike dragons, which often represent chaos, griffins were protectors, but fiercely so. Medieval bestiaries described them as untamable, able to carry off oxen or even men who dared trespass. Alchemists later claimed they guarded the philosopher's stone, while heraldry turned them into emblems of vigilance. From desert fossils to imperial insignia, the griffin's evolution reveals something profound: humanity's need for creatures that aren't just powerful but noble. A lion's strength paired with an eagle's vision, what better metaphor for the divine right of kings or the unyielding gaze of justice? The griffin endures because it's more than a monster. It's the ideal guardian, fierce yet righteous, a bridge between the mortal and the divine. Flames erupt from the creature's three heads, a lion's roar, a goat's bleat, and a serpent's hiss merging into one nightmarish chorus. The chimera wasn't just another monster from Greek myth. It was a living disaster, its very body a patchwork of primal fears. Homer's Iliad paints it as lion-fronted and snake behind, a goat in the middle, an abomination that ravaged Lycia until the hero Bellerophon rode the winged Pegasus to slay it. But the story's roots run deeper than poetry. Lycia's real-life Mount Chimera still burns today, eternal flames seeping from cracks in the earth where natural gas vents ignite spontaneously. Ancient travelers stumbling upon this geothermal wonder might have seen not geology, but the breath of a monster slain centuries before. Yet the chimera's legacy isn't confined to Greek shores. Halfway across the world, Hindu texts describe the Sharapa, a fiery beast with a lion's ferocity, a bird's wings, and a serpent's tail, created by the gods to subdue a destructive Shiva. The Mayans worshipped Camazotz, a bat-headed deity with jaguar claws, lurking in caves to devour the unwary. These hybrids share more than just monstrous traits, they're embodiments of nature's untamed duality. A volcano isn't just fire, but earth and air convulsing together. A jungle isn't merely growth, but life and decay entwined. What unites these creatures across cultures is their role as thresholds, beings that exist between worlds. The chimera's lion head symbolizing nobility, its goat body fertility, and its serpent tail cunning, forcing heroes to confront all three. In India, the Sharabha mediated between divine wrath and mercy, while Camazots guarded the boundary between the underworld and the living. Hybrid monsters, it seems, are how civilizations process the contradictions of existence itself. Creation and destruction, beauty and horror, all stitched together in one impossible form. The next time you hear a modern storyteller invent some multi-limbed alien, remember, they're walking a path first carved by ancient minds trying to name the unnameable. Beneath the shimmering surface of the sea, two very different legends take shape, one born from mistaken identity, the other from the raw ache of human longing. The mermaid's story begins not with a fish-tailed maiden, but with a grieving goddess. In ancient Assyria, Atargates, the deity of fertility and water, accidentally caused her mortal lover's death. Overcome with guilt, she plunged into a lake, transforming into half-woman, half-fish, not as punishment, but as a manifestation of her sorrow. This was no Disney princess. Her earliest carvings show a creature both divine and monstrous, a symbol of nature's untamed duality. Fast forward to 1493, when Christopher Columbus, sailing near Hispaniola, scribbled in his journal that he'd spotted mermaids, only to add, disappointedly, that they were not as beautiful as painted. Historians now believe he saw manatees, their human-like eyes and nursing habits sparking a case of sailors' wishful thinking. Yet while mermaids were often feared as omens of storms or shipwrecks, the selkie of Orkney folklore carried a different kind of weight. These seal people could shed their skins to walk on land, their stories steeped in melancholy. In one haunting tale, a fisherman hides a selkie woman's pelt, forcing her to become his wife, until she finds it years later and returns to the sea without a glance back. What makes these legends endure isn't just their magic, but their emotional resonance. Selkie stories speak to captivity, of stolen autonomy, of the domestic chains that bind, while mermaids reflect our fascination with the unknown, the seductive danger lurking just beyond the horizon. One is a warning about possession, the other a mirror of our thirst for what we cannot possess. The waters that birthed these creatures are the same that carried explorers and fishermen, their minds playing tricks under the endless blue. Whether it's a manatee mistaken for a maiden or a sealskin hidden under the floorboards, these myths remind us that the sea doesn't just hold monsters, it holds our hopes, our regrets, and the stories we tell to make sense of both. The Cyclops looms large in mythology as a hulking, one-eyed terror, but its origins might be tucked inside the dusty caves of the Mediterranean, where ancient Greeks stumbled upon skulls unlike any they'd seen before. Picture a farmer in Bronze Age Crete, plow scraping against what he thinks is a boulder, only to unearth a massive skull with a single, gaping hole in the center. To modern paleontologists, it's clearly the fossil of a Deinotherium, an extinct dwarf elephant whose nasal cavity sits where a forehead would be, easily mistaken for a solitary eye socket. But to someone 3,000 years ago, this was proof that giants once walked the earth, giants with a single, staring eye. Homer's Odyssey immortalized them as Polyphemus, the cannibalistic Cyclops who trapped Odysseus's crew in his cave, but the creature's roots stretch even further back. The Phoenicians, master traders of the ancient world, spread tales of one-eyed monsters guarding distant shores, possibly inspired by encounters with these very fossils along their trade routes. Yet the Cyclops isn't confined to Greek epics. Hindu texts speak of the Danavas, towering one-eyed beings cast into the underworld, a striking parallel that hints at a shared human fascination with single-eyed giants. Some scholars propose these stories might mirror real-life mining disasters, where collapsed tunnels left survivors with gruesome head injuries or crushed eye sockets, their twisted faces becoming the stuff of campfire legends. In Sardinia, where ancient miners tunneled deep for copper and obsidian, archaeologists have found skeletons with trauma consistent with cave-ins, their skulls bearing horrific wounds. Imagine the stories that might have sprung from such encounters, men emerging from the darkness, half blind and scarred, mistaken for remnants of a monstrous race. What makes the Cyclops myth so enduring isn't just the thrill of danger, but the way it morphs to fit human fears. For sailors, it was the terror of the unknown lurking on uncharted islands. For miners, it was the subterranean horror waiting in the pitch-black depths. Even today, the symbol of a single eye, whether in myth, folklore, or modern conspiracy theories, holds power. A reminder that some truths are best seen not with two eyes, but through the lens of the stories we tell to explain the unexplainable. The basilisk slithers through history not as a single creature, but as a shape-shifting nightmare, morphing with each century's deepest terrors. Its legend begins with Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist who described it in 79 AD as a serpent no longer than 12 fingers, yet so venomous its mere hiss could split rocks and wither plants. But here's the twist: Pliny wasn't spinning fairy tales. Scholars now believe he was documenting real encounters with the Egyptian cobra, a snake whose venom melts flesh and whose defensive posture includes spreading a hood that might have inspired the basilisk's reputed crown. Yet by the Middle Ages, this small but lethal reptile had undergone a grotesque metamorphosis. Illustrated manuscripts depicted it as a monstrous hybrid, part rooster, part serpent, hatched from a chicken's egg incubated by a toad. This bizarre evolution wasn't accidental. Medieval theologians latched onto the basilisk as the ultimate symbol of corruption. Its very birth, a perversion of natural order, mirrored their warnings against moral decay. Sermons thundered about how the creature's gaze could kill, comparing it to the alluring but deadly nature of sin. A 13th-century bestiary from England even claimed the basilisk's only weakness was the scent of a weasel, interpreted as Christ's purity overcoming evil. The irony: this king of serpents, feared for its power, was often illustrated cowering before its tiny nemesis, a metaphor for how righteousness could topple even the most formidable vice. But the basilisk's most chilling legacy lies in its psychological grip. During the Black Death, panicked crowds blamed basilisks for spreading plague, claiming their breath poisoned entire towns. In reality, these sightings were likely hallucinations from ergot poisoning, a moldy grain fungus causing delirium. Yet the myth persisted, evolving again in the Renaissance as alchemists sought to harness its lethal properties for potions. Even Shakespeare weaponized it, having Lady Macbeth invoke the basilisk's gaze to signify her murderous resolve. From cobra to cosmic horror, the basilisk's journey reveals how humans weaponize folklore, transforming a snake into something far more dangerous, an idea that strikes faster than any fang. A mournful wail cuts through the night air, not the wind, not an animal, but something far more unsettling. The banshee's cry isn't just a ghost story, it's a cultural echo of grief etched into Ireland's very soil. The banshee, or woman of the fairy mounds, first appears in medieval texts as one of the owls, supernatural beings tied to the land, but her role wasn't to harm, it was to warn. Ancient Irish families believed only certain bloodlines merited her attention, her keening song a harbinger of impending death in the household. Yet this tradition might owe as much to Viking invaders as to Celtic folklore. Norse sagas speak of Valkyries not just guiding warriors to Valhalla, but singing their deaths into being, a parallel too striking to ignore. When Viking longships landed on Irish shores, their death singers may have merged with local spirits, creating something entirely new. The banshee's power lies in her duality. In some tales, she's a beautiful young woman with silver hair, her voice a sorrowful melody. In others, she's a hunched crone with bloodshot eyes, claws scraping the earth as she mourns. Regional variations only deepen the mystery. Scotland's Keenig, literally the weeper, never appears, her presence marked only by heart-wrenching sobs near waterfalls or in lonely glens. These differences aren't contradictions, they're reflections of how grief itself manifests, sometimes visible, sometimes unseen, but always deeply personal. What's often overlooked is the banshee's connection to real funeral customs. The keening ritual, where women wailed improvised laments for the dead, was once central to Irish mourning. Professional keeners, their voices trained to pierce the air, would guide communities through grief until the church banned the practice as pagan. The banshee myth preserved what the clergy tried to erase, the raw, cathartic power of vocalized sorrow. Even today, hearing a screech owl's cry or a fox's scream in the Irish twilight can send shivers down the spine, not because people still believe, but because the banshee's voice taps into something primal. She's not just a ghost, she's the embodiment of loss, a reminder that some goodbyes echo across centuries. Her modern descendants are everywhere, from horror films to anime, but the original banshee was never a monster. She was a witness, a mourner, a keeper of stories too painful to speak aloud. In a world that often silences grief, her wail remains one of folklore's most honest creations, unafraid to scream what others whisper. Deep in the heart of the Knossos Palace, a fresco shimmers with impossible athleticism, lithe figures somersaulting over the back of a charging bull, their bodies arched in perfect defiance of gravity. This is no mere decoration, it's a window into a civilization that worshipped the bull's raw power, a reverence that birthed one of mythology's most enduring monsters, the Minotaur. The creature's origin story is etched in blood, and betrayal queen Pasiphae's unnatural union with a bull, the monstrous offspring imprisoned in Daedalus's labyrinth, fed on Athenian youth. But beneath this shocking tale lies a cultural obsession far older than Greece. The Minoans, Bronze Age rulers of Crete, didn't just depict bull leaping in their art, they built entire rituals around it. Archaeologists uncovering Knossos found altars stained with bovine blood and bones arranged in ceremonial patterns, hinting at sacrifices to appease the same force that would later be demonized as the Minotaur. What's often overlooked is how this horror mirrors earlier Mesopotamian myths. The Assyrian Lamashu winged bulls with human faces stood as divine protectors, their hybrid forms symbolizing the union of animal strength and human intellect. Even the zodiac's Taurus carries echoes of this duality, the bull's celestial image representing both fertility and untamed aggression. The Minotaur isn't just a monster, it's the dark inversion of these sacred symbols, a warning of what happens when humanity's bond with the divine beast snaps. Some scholars take this further, pointing to evidence of human sacrifice in Minoan ruins, skeletons with blade marks, buried near bull horns. Could the Minotaur myth be a garbled memory of actual rituals where priests donned bull masks to channel the animal's spirit? The labyrinth itself may hold the answer. Unlike later Greek versions, the original Knossos complex wasn't a maze but a sprawling palace with corridors designed to disorient. Frescoes show double-headed axes, labries in Greek, suggesting the labyrinth was less a prison and more a sacred space where humans danced with the divine. When later civilizations demonized Minoan practices, the bull god became a monster, the ritual site his lair. Even the Minotaur's name, Asterion, ties back to stars, linking him to Taurus's constellation, a cosmic reminder that myths never truly die. They just change shape as cultures reframe the sacred into the terrifying, the divine into the damned. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of Japan's sacred mountains, where ancient cedars claw at the sky, the Tengu began its story not as a guardian but as a terror. The earliest records from the 8th century describe these creatures as dog-faced demons with wings like kites, snatching children and spreading disease, a far cry from the noble warriors they'd become. Buddhist texts painted them as enemies of the faith, shape-shifting tricksters who lured monks into sin. One chilling tale tells of a Tengu disguising itself as a golden Buddha, only to reveal its true form mid-prayer, laughing as the devout scrambled back in horror. Yet somewhere between these demonic origins and their modern image as fierce but honorable protectors lies a transformation as dramatic as the creatures themselves. The turning point came with the rise of the Yamabushi mountain ascetics who braved the wilderness to seek enlightenment. These rugged hermits, clad in saffron robes and wielding wooden staffs, began encountering Tengu not as foes but as teachers. Legends spoke of winged sages appearing in dreams to impart secret martial arts techniques, or scolding lazy trainees with gusts of wind that knocked them off cliffside paths. The Tengu's hooked nose, once a symbol of bestial cruelty, became a mark of wisdom, resembling the exaggerated features of masks worn in sacred No theater. This shift wasn't accidental. As Buddhism merged with Japan's native Shinto beliefs, the Tengu evolved into intermediaries, punishers of arrogance, yet defenders of the righteous. But the Tengu's most surprising legacy lies in their connection to real historical strife. During the feudal era, warlords claimed Tengu ancestry to legitimize their rule, while rebel monks used their imagery in anti-shogunate propaganda. Woodblock prints depicted them training legendary warriors like Minamoto no Yoshitsune, blending myth with political resistance. Even today, the Tengu's duality endures. In some villages, they're still blamed for unexplained fires or missing travelers, while martial arts dojos honor them as symbols of discipline. From demon to deity, menace to mentor, the Tengu's journey reflects Japan's own, a dance between shadow and light, where even the fiercest spirits can find redemption in the mountain's thin, holy air. When Marco Polo scribbled in his travel journals about a bird so massive it could lift elephants into the sky, even his contemporaries thought he'd succumb to desert mirages. But centuries later, paleontologists digging through Madagascar's mudflats unearthed bones that turned fantasy into startling reality. The Vorom titan, a 10-foot-tall, 1,000-pound avian titan now known as the elephant bird. Its eggshells, thick as dinner plates, could hold over 7 gallons of liquid, and its claw marks fossilized in ancient riverbeds suggest it could disembowel prey with a single kick. Polo's rock wasn't pure imagination. It was a distorted echo of traders' tales carried across the Indian Ocean, where Malagasy legends spoke of the Vorompatra, a flightless giant whose extinction around 1000 AD coincided with human arrival. The puzzle pieces fit almost too perfectly, sailors mistaking skeletal remains for a winged predator, their stories growing taller with each retelling until a bird that couldn't even fly became a sky-bound juggernaut. Yet the rock's wings stretch beyond Madagascar. Its earliest feathers sprout from Persian mythology's Simurgh, a benevolent, dog-faced phoenix said to live 1700 years before casting itself into flames. This creature wasn't just a bird but a cosmic librarian, its feathers inscribed with all-universal knowledge, its nest perched atop the tree of life. Sufi poets like Attar spun the Simurgh into allegory, representing the soul's journey toward enlightenment. How did this philosophical entity morph into the Rock of Arabian Nights, a beast so vast its wings darkened the sun? The answer lies in the Dhow ships crisscrossing the Indian Ocean. Persian and Arab sailors merged the Simurgh's majesty with fragmentary accounts of real megafauna, birthing a hybrid legend that soared through Sinbad's adventures. In one tale, the rock's egg mistaken for a domed palace shatters when Sinbad's crew cooks its contents, invoking the bird's wrath. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a cautionary metaphor for medieval navigation. The rock's territory marked uncharted waters where arrogance led to disaster, its very existence a warning against underestimating nature's scale. What makes the rock truly fascinating isn't just its mixed ancestry, but how it embodies humanity's relationship with the unknown. Polo's description of its feathers, 12 paces long and thicker than palm fronds, mirrors the quills of New Zealand's extinct moa, while its elephant-lifting strength echoes griffin myth spawned by Protoceratops fossils. These parallels reveal a pattern. When faced with the bones of lost giants, cultures worldwide didn't see extinct animals. They saw monsters, angels, or in the rock's case, living proof that the Earth still held wonders beyond maps. Today, as drone footage captures the shadow of an Andean condor skimming the Nazca Plains, It's hard not to feel a flicker of what those ancient sailors felt, the eerie sense that somewhere just beyond the horizon, creatures of legend might still soar. The water ripples unnaturally, not from wind or tide, but something moving beneath the surface, something watching. Along Scotland's lochs and rivers, few legends send chills down the spine like the kelpie, a shape-shifting predator disguised as a sleek black horse. But this isn't just a spooky campfire tale, it's a survival story carved from tragedy. Picture a traveler at dusk spotting a saddled stallion by the water's edge. Mount it and its skin turns adhesive, dragging you into the depths as the creature revels in your terror. Historical records reveal a grim truth behind the myth. 19th century coroner reports from the Highlands note an unsettling number of drownings near lochs, often with no witnesses or clear cause. The kelpie wasn't just fantasy, it was a folkloric warning, a way to explain the inexplicable pull of treacherous currents and sudden storms that claimed lives without a trace. What makes the kelpie unique isn't just its brutality, but its cunning. Unlike straightforward monsters, it weaponizes trust. Legends describe its shifting forms, sometimes a handsome man luring victims close before revealing hooves and waterweed hair, other times a docile pony tempting children onto its back. This adaptability mirrors real-world dangers: slick rocks disguised by shallow water, riptides masquerading as calm surf. The kelpie's greatest trick isn't its strength, but its ability to exploit human desperation. A starving farmer might ignore the eerie glow in the horse's eyes, seeing only a chance to plough his fields. Yet Scotland's waterhorse isn't alone in folklore's murky depths. Iceland's Nyka takes the deception further. Its hooves face backward to confuse trackers, and its whinny sounds like a mournful human cry. Welsh tales speak of the cephal dwsa complexar, a creature that vanishes mid-ride, leaving riders stranded in boggy marshes. These parallels aren't coincidence, they're cultural responses to shared traumas. Coastal communities from the Hebrides to Reykjavik knew the ocean's fickleness firsthand. When a child wandered too close to the shore or a fisherman never returned, blaming a shape-shifting spirit was easier than accepting nature's indifference. The kelpie's legacy lingers in modern psychology as much as mythology. Therapists working with survivors of near drowning often report hallucinations of being pulled under by some unseen force, a phenomenon that might explain ancient kelpie sighting accounts. Even today, Scottish parents warn kids away from lone horses near water, proving that some fears transcend generations. The kelpie isn't just a monster, it's a metaphor for the seductive danger we're taught to avoid but can't help approaching, drawn by curiosity or need. And perhaps that's why these stories endure. They remind us that the deepest waters hide not just predators, but the echoes of those who learned the hard way. Before snakes crowned her head and petrifying gaze defined her myth, Medusa wasn't a monster, she was a goddess. Ancient Libyan petroglyphs depict her as a serpent-haired protector, her image carved into temple walls to ward off evil. The Greeks, encountering these traditions through trade routes, reframed her into the Gorgon we know today, but traces of her divinity linger. One clue lies in the Gorgonaean, those grotesque masks with lolling tongues and wild eyes that adorned Greek shields and doorways. Far from mere decorations, these were apotropaic talismans, believed to turn away harm by mirroring its own horror back at it. The earliest versions, found in Crete and dating back to the 8th century before the Common Era, show Medusa not as a vanquished foe but as a sacred face, her features echoing older Near Eastern deities like the Mesopotamian Lamashtu. Now consider Perseus, her supposed slayer. His story takes on new layers when viewed through an astronomical lens. The hero's name translates to the destroyer, but some scholars argue it derives from the Hittite word for sky. His flight with winged sandals mirrors the path of the constellation Perseus, which rises in the northeast during the harvest season. The same time ancient Greeks celebrated the Thesmophoria, a festival honoring Demeter and Persephone that involved serpentine imagery. Even Medusa's decapitation aligns with celestial patterns. The algol star in Perseus, known as the demon star, dims rhythmically every few days as if winking, a phenomenon ancients might have interpreted as the Gorgon's severed head pulsating with power. But the most revealing twist lies in Medusa's blood. According to Hesiod, when Perseus beheaded her, her spilled blood birthed Pegasus and the warrior Chrysaor. This echoes Libyan creation myths where serpent deities' blood fertilized the earth, linking Medusa to primal life forces rather than mere destruction. Later, Roman poets like Ovid would weaponize her story, transforming her into a victim of Athena's wrath, a narrative that says more about patriarchal fears of female power than ancient belief. From Libyan temples to Greek battle standards, Medusa's evolution reflects how cultures repurpose symbols, turning reverence into terror whenever they need a monster to conquer. Her true legacy isn't petrification, it's persistence, a face that refuses to fade even when stripped of its divinity. The sky darkens not with storm clouds, but with wings vast enough to blot out the sun, wings that belong to no ordinary bird, but to the thunderbird of indigenous North American lore. For the Algonquin, Ojibwe, and Lakota peoples, this wasn't just a myth, it was a force of nature woven into creation stories. When the thunderbird flapped its wings, thunder rolled across the plains. When it blinked, lightning split the sky, but recent discoveries suggest these legends might have roots in something tangible. Along the Badlands of South Dakota, where wind erodes ancient rock, lies a graveyard of pterosaur fossils, some with wingspans rivaling small airplanes. For tribes who unearthed these bones thousands of years later, encountering the jagged beak of a pteranodon or the curved talons of a Quetzalcoatlus, the leap to a supernatural avian ruler wouldn't just be logical, it'd be inevitable. Yet the thunderbird's symbolism runs deeper than misidentified fossils. The creature's role as a bridge between earth and sky mirrors the mastodon bones found near Great Lakes petroglyphs. Some tribal traditions speak of the thunderbird battling monstrous water serpents, a story that aligns eerily with Ice Age fossil beds where mastodon skeletons lie tangled with plesiosaur remains. Imagine a pre-colonial hunter stumbling upon such a scene, colossal ribs jutting from the mud beside serpentine vertebrae. Wouldn't it make sense to assume these were the remains of a cosmic battle between sky and water deities? But the thunderbird isn't alone in its celestial dominion. Half a world away, Slavic tribes revered Perun, their thunder god, who rode a golden eagle whose screech became lightning. Norse legends told of Thor's chariot pulled by twin goats, creatures whose hooves struck sparks that became thunderstorms. These parallels reveal a universal truth. When humans witness nature's raw power, we personify it. Whether it's the thunderbird's wings churning storms or Perun's eagle hurling divine bolts, these myths are more than stories, they're ancient attempts to explain the unexplainable, to give voice to the voiceless fury of the skies. And in that shared awe, cultures separated by continents and centuries find common ground under the shadow of mighty wings. Lurking in the shallow rivers of Japan, the kappa's green, scaly hands wait just beneath the surface, not to drown the unwary, but to steal a mythical organ called the shirikodama from their victims' rectums. This bizarre detail might sound like pure folklore until you learn about the Edo-era medical texts describing the kappa's surgical precision, eerily mirroring real-life accounts of water-related prolapse injuries. The creature's turtle-like shell and beak evolved from practical origins. Ancient villagers encountering giant salamanders, 3-foot-long amphibians with eerily humanoid hands, mistook them for something far more sinister. But the kappa's most famous quirk, its obsession with cucumbers, reveals a deeper cultural layer. Farmers would carve their names into cucumbers and toss them into rivers as offerings, a practice still seen today in some Shinto shrines. This wasn't just superstition, it was a bargaining system with nature itself, ensuring safe passage through kappa territory in exchange for food. now cross continents to the peat bogs of Ireland, where the kelpie's Celtic cousin, the Uisge, shares unsettling similarities. Both are water spirits with reptilian features. Both demand ritual offerings. The Scots left barley cakes for kelpies, while the Irish tied red ribbons near each Uisge haunted lochs, and both possess uncanny anatomical knowledge. Medieval Welsh physicians recorded that certain river spirits could pinpoint pressure points to heal or harm, echoing the Kappa's legendary skill at setting bones. Could these parallels stem from universal human experiences? Drowning victims often exhibit bloating that distorts their features into something otherworldly, while the hair-raising effect of hypothermia might explain the Kappa's reported dish-shaped skull dent, said to hold water that grants its power. The Kappa's duality as both menace and medic reaches its peak in folk remedies. Scrolls from 18th century Kyoto describe Kappa bones ground into powders to treat fractures, while in Tono, villagers left surgical tools by rivers to curry favor with the creatures. This blurring between monster and mentor reflects a truth about water itself. It gives life just as easily as it takes it. Modern sightings still trickle in, usually near dams or construction sites disturbing riverbeds, proving that even in our concrete world, some legends refuse to dry up. The next time you see a cucumber floating downstream, remember, every culture has its water guardians, and their stories are less about fear than learning to respect the depth beneath the surface. With its lion's body and enigmatic face, the Sphinx reigns as one of mythology's most enduring hybrids, but its meaning shifts dramatically depending on which side of the Mediterranean you stand. Along the Nile, the Great Sphinx of Giza crouches as a timeless sentinel, its missing nose doing little to diminish its aura of divine authority. Carved from a single limestone outcrop around 2,500 years before the Common Era, this colossal statue wasn't just art, it was a living manifestation of the sun god Ra-Horakhti, its gaze fixed eastward to greet the dawn. Egyptian sphinxes always appeared wingless, their human heads often bearing the pharaoh's likeness, symbolizing wisdom and royal power fused with a lion's strength. The message was clear: challenge the king and you face the beast, yet cross the sea to Greece and the Sphinx transforms into something far more cunning. The Theban version that tormented Oedipus didn't guard temples, it devoured travelers who failed its riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? This famous question might seem like mere wordplay, but archaeologists have uncovered clues suggesting it was more than a brain-teaser. Linear bead tablets from Mycenaean palaces reference a strangling demon associated with regal succession crises, while frescoes at Pylos depict winged sphinxes perched above scenes of sacrificial offerings. Could the Oedipus myth be a garbled memory of Bronze Age dynastic struggles, where solving the riddle meant outmaneuvering political rivals? The Sphinx's abrupt suicide after Oedipus's answer takes on new weight when viewed through this lens, not just a monster bested but a system overthrown. The stark contrast between these two sphinxes reveals how cultures repurpose symbols to fit their needs. Egypt's version was stability incarnate, literally carved into the landscape. Greece's was chaos weaponized, a manifestation of existential uncertainty. Both, however, shared one vital trait: they guarded thresholds. Whether it was the desert's edge or the road to a city, the Sphinx marked the line between order and the unknown. Even today, their stone eyes seem to follow us, whispering that some riddles aren't meant to be solved, only respected. High in the thin air of the Himalayas, where glaciers creak and the wind howls like something alive, the Yeti isn't just a legend, it's a cultural cornerstone. Sherpa guides have whispered about the Mugoi for centuries, describing a towering, ape-like creature with reddish-brown fur that vanishes like mist into the rocks. But what's most striking isn't the story itself, but the precision of details across generations. Footprints measuring twice the size of a man's, a whistling call that echoes between peaks, and an uncanny ability to navigate sheer ice walls. These accounts feel too consistent to dismiss as mere folklore, especially when you consider the Himalayan brown bear, a reclusive subspecies that walks upright to survey its territory, leaving human-like tracks in the snow. Scientists now believe these bears, adapted to altitudes above 12,000 feet, might explain some Yeti sightings. Their shaggy fur, often tinged reddish from iron-rich soil, and their habit of standing on hind legs to dig for roots could easily be misinterpreted by exhausted climbers in low-oxygen conditions. Yet the Yeti's lore stretches beyond misidentified wildlife. Ancient Tibetan Buddhist texts reference the wild man of the snows as a spiritual entity, a bridge between the physical and divine realms. Monasteries once claimed to possess Yeti scalps, later revealed to be ritual objects crafted from goat hide, but no less sacred for their symbolism. This duality, the creature as both flesh and blood predator and metaphysical guide, echoes through Himalayan culture. When Sir Edmund Hillary mounted an expedition to find the Yeti in the 1960s, Sherpas reluctantly led him to high-altitude caves, not because they believed the beast could be caught, but because they understood some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Now cross the Pacific to the dense forests of North America, where Sasquatch lore shares eerie parallels. Indigenous tribes like the Coast Salish spoke of the Sasquatch long before European settlers arrived, describing a similarly massive, bipedal being that communicated through tree knocks and left footprints deep enough to pool rainwater. Unlike the Yeti's spiritual undertones, Sasquatch often embodied a more terrestrial warning, a reminder of nature's untamed dominance. But here's where science throws a fascinating twist into the mix. Fossil records of Gigantopithecus, a 10-foot-tall ape that roamed Southeast Asia until roughly 100,000 years ago. While no Gigantopithecus remains have been found in the Americas, some anthropologists speculate that ancestral memories of similar creatures could have crossed the Bering Land Bridge with early migrations, morphing into new forms in new land. What ties these legends together isn't just shared morphology, hulking figures cloaked in fur, but humanity's universal instinct to populate the wild's edges with something almost but not quite human. The Yeti and Sasquatch aren't mistakes, they're mirrors. In the Himalayas, the Yeti embodies the thin veil between mortal and mystical. In the Pacific Northwest, Sasquatch stands as the last sentinel of untouched wilderness. Both creatures, whether born from misidentified bears, ancestral memories of extinct primates, or something far more elusive, serve the same primal purpose: to remind us that no matter how many peaks we summit or forests we clear, some shadows will always retreat deeper into the unknown, just beyond our grasp. The night air in Puerto Rico's rural countryside hung thick with tension in early 1995, a tension that would soon crystallize into one of the most pervasive monster panics of modern times. Farmers began reporting livestock corpses drained of blood, puncture marks marring their necks as if something had surgically extracted every drop. Then came the eyewitness sketches, a creature with leathery gray skin, glowing red eyes and spines running down its back, moving like a kangaroo on powerful hind legs. The chupacabra had arrived, and its name, literally goat sucker, spread like wildfire through headlines and late-night radio shows. But this wasn't just tabloid fodder, it was a phenomenon rooted in deeper fears. That same year, Puerto Rico faced a rabies outbreak among mongooses, sparking mass culls and quarantine zones. As carcasses piled up, whispers spread that the government was covering up something far worse: a biological experiment gone rogue, or worse, an extraterrestrial predator. Yet peel back the layers of hysteria, and you'll find older blood-sucking legends lurking beneath. In 1975, farmers in central Mexico described encounters with El Chupasanga, a bat-like creature that strangled chickens before draining their blood. Spanish colonial records from the 18th century mention similar beasts in the Andes, where villagers blamed vanished livestock on vampiric spirits called pistocos. These tales share an uncanny consistency. precision strikes on animals, an aversion to human confrontation, and that eerie absence of blood. But here's where science casts a cold light on the myth. Wildlife biologists studying the original Puerto Rico incidents noted the victims showed classic signs of opportunistic predation: foxes or feral dogs targeting weak animals, their canine teeth leaving neat punctures. The bloodless appearance, a natural coagulation process accelerated by tropical heat, giving the illusion of something far more sinister. The most compelling modern twist comes from Texas and the American Southwest, where chupacabra sightings skyrocketed in the 2000s. Instead of reptilian monsters, these cases revealed a different culprit: coyotes suffering from severe mange. The parasitic mite sarcopt scabby eye strips infected animals of fur, tightens their skin into a grayish hide, and contorts their gait into something unnatural. Photographs of these emaciated canines, their spines protruding and eyes sunken from dehydration, are nearly identical to the creatures described by terrified eyewitnesses. Yet even with scientific explanations, the chupacabra endures not because people refuse to believe the truth, but because the myth fills a primal need. In communities where economic instability or environmental crises loom, blaming a monster can feel easier than confronting systemic neglect. The chupacabra isn't just a cryptid, it's a scapegoat, a modern-day dragon to slay when the world feels out of control. And as long as fear thrives in the shadows, its legend will keep feeding. In the shifting sands of the Arabian desert, where mirages dance on the horizon and the wind whispers secrets, the jinn have lurked in human imagination long before the first verses of the Quran descended. These aren't mere ghosts or demons, they're beings of smokeless fire, as the Islamic texts describe them, entities with free will capable of great benevolence or terrifying malice. But their origins stretch back centuries before Islam, to the nomadic tribes of ancient Arabia who believed every oasis, every lonely dune was home to unseen spirits. The pre-Islamic jinn were neither wholly good nor evil. They were as unpredictable as the desert itself. A traveler might stumble upon a jinn's dwelling, a strange rock formation or a gnarled tree, and either find guidance or vanish without a trace. These spirits weren't just superstitions, they were explanations for the unexplainable. A sudden illness, a jinn's curse, a miraculous rescue from a sandstorm. A jinn's mercy. The Quran didn't erase these beliefs, it transformed them. Surah al-Jinn explicitly acknowledges their existence, even recounting how some listened to the Prophet's teachings and converted. This theological upgrade gave the jinn a new complexity. They became moral beings, subject to divine judgment like humans, yet traces of their older, wilder nature lingered. Islamic folklore brims with tales of jinn kingdoms hidden beneath the earth, their societies mirroring humanity's with kings, poets, and outcasts. Some medieval Islamic scholars, like al-Jahiz, wrote entire treatises classifying jinn types, from the shape-shifting ifrit to the playful ghouls that haunted graveyards. What's fascinating is how these descriptions echo far beyond Arabia. The Roman genii los, spirits tied to specific places, shared the jinn's role as guardians or tormentors of locations. Leave an offering at a sacred spring, and the genius might bless your journey. Disrespect a desert shrine, and a jinn could lead you astray. Both traditions reveal a universal human instinct to personify the unseen forces that shape our survival. Even more striking are the parallels to Zoroastrianism's devas, entities often depicted as destructive spirits opposing divine order. In Persia's blistering deserts, where survival hinged on respecting natural balance, the devas embodied chaos, much like the rogue jinn who brought disease or drought. Yet in a twist of cultural exchange, some scholars argue early Arab traders might have blended diva lore with local jinn beliefs, creating hybrid demons that later influenced Islamic depictions of evil jinn. The shared motifs are hard to ignore. Both divas and malevolent jinn could possess humans, both thrived in desolate places, and both served as cautionary tales about moral and environmental boundaries. But the jinn's most enduring power lies in their ambiguity. Unlike Western demons irrevocably damned or angels purely benevolent, jinn occupy a sprawling grey area. They marry, wage wars, and even practice religion. Stories tell of Jewish and Christian jinn debating theology in medieval Baghdad. This nuance makes them uniquely adaptable. Modern horror films might reduce them to exorcism fodder, but across the Middle East, many still hang blue amulets to ward off the evil eye, a tradition rooted in jinn lore. Even science nods to their legacy. Sleep paralysis episodes in the region are often attributed to jinn visitation, a cultural lens shaping how the brain interprets stress. From pre-Islamic poetry to Quranic verse, from nomadic campfires to urban legends, the jinn endure because they're more than monsters. They're mirrors of our deepest fears and quietest hopes, glowing like embers in the dark. Before the Bible's Leviathan coiled through the pages of Scripture, it thrashed in the nightmares of an even older civilization, the Canaanites, who called it Lotan. This seven-headed sea serpent wasn't just a monster. It was chaos incarnate, the enemy of the storm god Baal, who had to slay it annually to ensure the world's order. Ugaritic texts from 1400 years before the Common Era describe Lotan as the twisting serpent, the powerful one with 7 heads, its defeat symbolizing the cyclical triumph of creation over entropy. Fast forward to the Book of Job, and the Leviathan emerges with terrifying vividness, its scales like shields, its breath lighting coals, its very presence untamable by hooks or harpoons. The parallels are unmistakable, but here's what's fascinating. The biblical authors didn't just copy the myth, they weaponized it. Whereas Baal fought Lotan yearly, Yahweh in Job boasts of having already conquered Leviathan, repurposing the creature as proof of divine omnipotence. This wasn't plagiarism, it was theological one-upmanship, a way to assert that Israel's God didn't merely battle chaos, he owned it. But what flesh and blood horror could have birthed such a legend? Whale strandings offer a grisly clue. Picture ancient coastal villagers stumbling upon the rotting carcass of a 60-foot sperm whale, its jaws bristling with teeth the size of daggers, its skin studded with parasitic crustaceans that might have looked like scales. The stench alone would have been apocalyptic, the bloated corpse bursting with gases that could mimic the smoke from its nostrils, described in Job. Even the Leviathan's fiery breath finds eerie parallels in bioluminescent algae sometimes seen pooling around dead marine giants, their eerie glow mistaken for underwater fire. Mediterranean cultures had no framework for understanding such remains, no concept of deep-sea gigantism. To them, these weren't dead animals but the leftover corpses of defeated chaos monsters, physical proof that the gods had won some primordial war. Yet the Leviathan's most enduring power lies in its symbolic adaptability. In Psalms, it's a foe to be slaughtered at the end of days. In Job, it's a divine plaything, proof that some forces are too magnificent for humans to control. Rabbinical texts later spun it into cosmic decor. The Leviathan's flesh would feast the righteous at Messiah's banquet, its skin stretched over Jerusalem as a shining canopy. This evolution from monster to metaphor reveals a profound truth. Cultures don't just fear chaos, they need it. Without the Leviathan, there's nothing for divinity to conquer, no backdrop against which order shines brighter. Even today, when we speak of slaying our demons or battling inner dragons, we're walking a path first carved by Bronze Age poets who stared into the tempest and saw not just terror but meaning. The Leviathan endures because it's more than a myth, it's the shadow that makes the light worth fighting for. The floodwaters that drowned the world in ancient legends didn't just recede, they left something behind. From the silt-choked ruins of Mesopotamia to the highland temples of the Aztecs, every culture that tells of a great deluge also seems to birth monsters from the deep. Consider Tiamat, the Babylonian chaos dragon whose split corpse became the heavens and earth in the Enuma Elish. She wasn't merely a villain, she was the primordial sea itself, her rebellion against the gods mirroring the catastrophic floods that regularly swallowed Mesopotamian cities. When the Tigris and Euphrates overflowed their banks, obliterating entire villages, it's no wonder scribes saw divine warfare in the churning waters, a serpentine embodiment of nature's fury that had to be vanquished for order to return. Now cross the ocean to Mesoamerica, where the Aztec creation myth pits the god Tezcatlipoca against Cipactli, a crocodilian beast with gaping mouths at every joint. Like Tiamat, Cipactli is dismembered to form the world, but here's the eerie parallel. Both stories emerge from flood-heavy regions. The Aztec heartland suffered seasonal inundations so violent they buried pyramids under meters of mud. Could Cipactli's many maws represent the whirlpools and sinkholes that claimed lives during these disasters? Archaeologists have found evidence of ritual offerings, jade figurines, and sacrificial knives tossed into lakes precisely where the water turned treacherous, as if appeasing something lurking beneath. The connections grow stranger when you trace them to Greece. Before Poseidon ruled the seas, there was the Titan Oceanus, a serpentine river god encircling the earth, another echo of the flood myth's watery chaos. Even the Bible's Leviathan, described in Job as making the sea boil like a pot, shares traits with these earlier monsters. The common thread isn't just water, but transformation. Flood myths aren't solely about destruction, they're about rebirth, the moment when the old world dies and a new one struggles to emerge. The monsters are the intermediaries, the living embodiments of that terrifying in-between state where nothing is solid yet. What seals this theory are the fossils. In ancient Mesopotamia, where Tiamat's legend thrived, archaeologists have unearthed mastodon bones wedged between layers of flood sediment, remnants of real prehistoric giants drowned in long-forgotten cataclysms. The Aztecs, too, prized water stones now identified as fossilized dinosaur teeth, possibly discovered in eroded riverbanks after storms. When your entire worldview is shaped by inundations that rewrite the landscape, finding the bones of creatures you've never seen might feel like uncovering the corpses of the gods' enemies. These flood myths, then, aren't just stories, they're trauma responses coded in dragon scales and serpent teeth, warnings that the water doesn't just give life. It remembers, and sometimes it gives back what we least expect. In the quiet villages of post-plague England, a chilling sight stalked the edges of twilight, a black dog with glowing eyes, its massive paws leaving scorch marks on the cobblestones. The locals called it Black Shuck, a harbinger of doom said to appear before disasters. But what if this spectral hound wasn't just a ghost story? Psychologists point to collective trauma as the breeding ground for such legends. After the Black Death wiped out half of Europe, survivors grappled with unimaginable loss, their grief morphing into something tangible, a creature to blame for the suffering that defied explanation. Carl Jung called these shared nightmares archetypes, primal images buried deep in humanity's subconscious that rise to the surface during crises. The black dog, appearing across cultures from Scotland's Grimm to Mexico's Cadillo, isn't just a coincidence, it's a manifestation of our darkest fears given fangs and fur. Wars, too, birthed their own monsters. During the 30 Years' War, German peasants whispered of the Nachtsara, a corpse that chewed its burial shroud to spread plague among the living. Historians now recognize these tales as distorted accounts of mass graves, where bloated bodies shifted in their shallow pits, their jaws slackening from decay. The Nachtsara wasn't folklore, it was trauma crystallized, a way to process the sight of loved ones rotting unburied while mercenaries razed villages. Even today, soldiers returning from combat report seeing shadow people, faceless figures lurking in peripheral vision, a phenomenon neurologists link to hypervigilance and sleep deprivation. When reality becomes unbearable, the mind conjures monsters to make sense of the chaos. But cryptids aren't always born from fear, sometimes they emerge from longing. The Irish puka, a shape-shifting trickster, often appeared during famines as a benevolent figure offering food or warnings. Folklorists suggest these stories provided hope amidst starvation, a supernatural ally when human aid failed. Similarly, during Japan's Edo period famines, the zashiki-warashi childlike spirits were said to bring fortune to households on the brink of collapse. These creatures didn't haunt, they healed, offering psychological refuge when the world offered none. What unites these legends isn't just shared imagery, but a fundamental human need to externalize pain, to name the unnameable. Whether it's a ghostly dog stalking plague survivors or a kindly spirit aiding the starving, cryptids are more than myths. They're mirrors reflecting our deepest wounds and sometimes the fragile stitches we use to hold ourselves together. From towering dragons born of dinosaur bones to blood-drinking chupacabras forged in modern panics, the origins of mythical creatures are as varied as humanity itself. These legends spring from the cracks between what we know and what we fear, fossils mistaken for living beasts, diseases twisted into curses, and the raw, untamed wilderness personified. Some, like the griffin, emerged from ancient traders marveling at protoceratops skulls in the Gobi Desert. Others, like the vampire, took shape from the very real horrors of decomposition observed in plague-ridden villages. The thunderbird's wings cast shadows from actual pterosaur remains, while the kraken's tentacles grew longer with every sailor's tale of giant squid encounters. Yet what's most astonishing isn't just how these stories began, it's how they persist. The same instincts that made medieval peasants blame shape-shifting wolves for rabies outbreaks now fuel modern cryptid hunters scanning blurry trail cameras for Sasquatch. Our need to populate the unknown with monsters hasn't faded, it's evolved. Deep-sea trenches, uncharted rainforests, and even the vastness of space have become the new "here be dragons" on our mental maps. So here's the question that lingers like mist over a lonely loch. In a world where satellites map every inch of the planet, which of these creatures might still be lurking just beyond the edge of our understanding? Could the Yeti's footprints in Himalayan snow belong to an undiscovered primate? Might the kappa's eerie clicks in Japanese rivers be some elusive salamander? Or perhaps, like the colossal squid, once myth and now documented reality, there are beings stranger than fiction still waiting in the shadows. Tell us in the comments which legendary creature's origin shocked you most. And more importantly, which one do you secretly hope might still be out there?